Hi everybody, so this chapter that we're covering is all about variances. So first we're going to go through a standard cost, figuring that out. We're going to go through a variance. I'll probably have to have 2 videos for this one. So I have this information. We have 100 employees. Hours per week is 40. Standard wage per hour is 21. Standard labor time per faucet is 20 minutes. Standard number of pounds of brass takes 5 pounds. Standard price per labor is $2.80. Then we go into the actual. We have actual price per pound is $2.72. We actually produced 59,008. We had actual pounds of brass used was 59,875. We actually produced 11,820 faucets. Actual wage per hour was $21.40, and the actual hours for the week for 4,000. So what we want to do first on this problem is I need to find the standard price per unit. Okay, I need to find the standard cost per unit for direct material and for my direct labor. So my direct material, what I'm going to wind up doing, I'm going to put the calculation over here. I'm going to take the $2.80. That was my standard price per pound of brass times my $5. I'm just going to put that in pounds. $5 per pound. That's how much standard number of pounds per brass is needed. And let me actually spell that right. Okay. Well, I can't spell here. So we use the $2.80. That was the standard. We needed 5 pounds is the standard number of pounds on the brass. So we take the $2.80, we take that times the 5, we get $14. If I want to find my direct labor standard, so direct labor, we had standard is $21. Now, it says it takes 20 minutes. So what I have to do is I have to take that 20 minutes, I have to divide it by 60 minutes. And then that gives me, if I multiply that out, that gives me my standard cost per unit for direct material and direct labor is $21. Okay, so if you ever run across a problem, they may ask you what the standard cost per unit for direct material and direct labor is. Let's go to this page where now I'm actually going to do material variance and labor variance. So I can figure out my usage, my material quantity variance, whether or not it's favorable or unfavorable, and my material price variance. And then this would be my total direct material cost variance. And I can determine whether or not it's favorable or unfavorable. And I meant to take those out. So if you follow, this is something that we've kind of created. It's kind of a flow chart. It's a little bit different because in your book they do actual quantity first and then they do standard quantity. I'm reversing it, and I'll show you why when we go through this. So what you want to do when you're looking at your usage, you need to figure out on here, you have your standard quantity times your standard price. So we used, during the week, we produced 11,820 faucets. Now, if you remember, it takes $5 or 5 pounds per faucet, right? So then I can take my 11,820 times my 5 pounds. This is the material I use, 59,100. That is our standard quantity. And if we want to put standard quantity here, our standard price that we set, that was the $2.80 per pound. So what that does is that gives us 165,480. Now, for our usage, we look at our actual quantity. And they come over here and they say actual pounds of brass used during the week was 59,875. That came from this amount over here. And we still want to take it times our standard price. Remember, your standard price per pound was $2.80. Okay, by doing this, it takes the guesswork out of, okay, I have actual quantity, I have standard quantity. What we wound up doing is having 2,170 is a negative. So we're going to say that was unfavorable. And if you look at it, we budgeted, or we said we were going to use 59,100 units, 59,100 pounds of brass. We actually used 59,875 pounds. So we are unfavorable. So then what I want to do is that gives me my usage variance, your material quantity variance. Now I want to look at my material price variance. When I'm looking at my material price variance, you always want to look at your actual quantity. The difference is we're going to look at what we set for our standard and what we set for our actual. So we actually use 59,875. They will have to, at this point in time, they will have to give you the actual quantity. We're not going to figure that out. The difference is our standard price again was $2.80. Our actual price that we paid for the brass came over here, which was $2.72. So since we have a positive, and when we're looking at this, we're just taking the difference between the 167,650 and the 162,860, taking the difference, we are favorable. So then when you're looking at this, you're going to add these together. You're going to add your unfavorable and your favorable. So for our cost, direct material cost variance, we had a 2,620 favorable. Now before we go to the next labor, just because something is unfavorable or favorable, it's not necessarily, if you think favorable, oh, that's good. Not necessarily. Unfavorable, oh, that's bad. Okay? Not necessarily. It just depends on, here we did 59,100. That's what we decided, okay, we're going to produce this many. It takes this many pounds of brass. So we're going to set our standard quantity at 59,800. We actually use 59,875. This is what's going to happen when your production manager is going to go back and say, okay, why did we use 775 pounds more than what we actually stated that we were going to do? Okay. Over here we're favorable, but the reason is the price went down on the material. So this helps us pinpoint more on what actually happened. Okay, so that's the material. Let's scroll down. Let's do labor. This is the same information that was up above, but now we need to find our labor time variance, and we have to find our labor rate variance. You're not supposed to see that yet. Okay, so what we're doing when we're looking at the labor variances, again, we want how many units did we produce. Okay, this is your production. Okay, remember it takes 20 minutes per faucet. Well, there's 60 minutes, so we need to take the 20 minutes divided by the 60 minutes, and that gives us a fraction of the portion of the 60 minutes. So then what I can do is I can take my 11,000 that we produced times my rate, and that gives me my standard hours. So this is the standard hours. We determined that our standard wage per hour is going to be $21. Okay, so that gave us 82,740. So then we look at actual hours times standard wages. Well, here they told us that the actual hours was 4,000 hours. Okay, so we had 4,000 hours that they'll have to provide us, still times the standard wage. Can you kind of guess what's going to happen? We're going to have an unfavorable. Okay, we determined that the standard hours, since it takes 0.333333 hours per faucet or 20 minutes per faucet, we should only have 3,940 hours. Here we had 4,000 hours. Okay, this could be caused by a lot of various things. Maybe we had a machine that went down that we had to repair. Maybe we hired a bunch of new people, so then there was a learning curve. So this we can narrow down. We had 60 hours that we went over. Okay. So then actual hours here, again, that was the 4,000. We take it times the actual wage. Our actual wage per hour was $21.40. I think we can figure out what's going to happen here. We're going to be unfavorable. Again, when you add these up, we're unfavorable. Okay, again, this may or may not necessarily be a bad thing. Yeah, we went over. We went over by 60 hours. Our wage was 40 cents higher than what we anticipated. But this helps the production manager see, okay, why were we 4,000 hours versus 3,940? We can go back and say, oh, yep, we hired a bunch of new people. So we had a learning curve. Oh, that machine, it went down. So we were down by 60 hours where we couldn't produce anything. All of that helps us in determining why our costs may or may not be off. So what we've done on these, we've done our standard cost. We figured out what our standard cost per unit is. And we've done the material variance and a labor variance. And I've helped label these by labor time variance, labor rate variance, and your total direct labor cost variance. I'm going to do another video where we're actually going to do all three plus some fixed overhead. So I'll see you in a little bit.